Welcome back to the MSU Deer Labs online seminar series. It is brought to you by the Mississippi State University Extension Service as well as the MSU Forest and Wildlife Research Center. I will be your presenter today. My name is Bronson Strickland, and I want to acknowledge my colleague and the co-director of the MSU Deer Lab, Steve Damaris. As the name implies, this presentation is all about cool season food plots. Want to review everything more or less that we've learned over the past 10 or 15 years. Want to go over the most common forages, their nutrient profiles, which plants work well, which ones work well in mixes, and which ones deer are attracted to. When we're finished with the presentation, my goal is that you are going to feel completely equipped to know what to plant on your property and why. By no means is this every possible thing you could write about or talk about with cool season food plots, but I think it's a really good collection, certainly for people starting out to get you going. Okay, so let's now move into more of the profiles of these different species, these different forages. And the first group I want to cover are the cereal grains. For me, that includes rye, wheat, and oats. I think those are your champion plants. They always work. They have a very long history of being effective and working in most areas and most situations. The other one is triticale or triticale, depending on your pronunciation, which is a hybrid between wheat and rye. Some people also use that. I never have, so I'm not going to cover it, but by all means, if you have used it and found it to be very effective, then please continue to do so. Let's keep in mind here, as we go through the cereal grains, in general, what their purpose is. I like to think of the cereal grain as that is going to be the forage that is going to produce the greatest amount of biomass and producing quality biomass in terms of nutrient quality earliest in the season, and therefore is going to be attracting deer to your plot during the hunting season, and especially for you bow hunters during bow season. So that's kind of the niche, and we're going to go into great detail about this later, but that's essentially the niche that it plays in part of a food plot system. If you were only concerned with, I'm just going to hunt over this plot, and when deer season is over, I have no concern for raising diet quality, adding more nutritious forage on the landscape, you can probably just stick with a cereal grain plot. Get a soil test, fertilize as needed, plant the cereal grain, and I guarantee you will have a very productive plot. The addition, as we'll talk about later, of the clovers and other forages really round that mix out and provide more nutrition for a greater period of time. So that's really the role of the cereal grains, is you're adding biomass earlier in the cool season, and so you're providing forage and you're providing an attractive element to that plot earlier in the year. Okay, let's start with wheat. Wheat is probably the most widespread, commonly planted cereal grain for deer food plots, and for very good reasons. Number one, it is likely in your area going to be the cheapest cereal grain. So you can see why that's included in a lot of mixes that you'll buy is the cost of it. So it's very, very cost effective. What are some pros and cons? Well, here's how it kind of fits in. It is a little more cold tolerant than oats, not as cold tolerant as rye. So it's kind of that middle ground. Again, why you see it so commonly is that it works pretty well, if not very well, in most places. Something new I'd like to draw your attention to, and I give all credit to my friend and colleague Craig Harper at the University of Tennessee has really brought this to the forefront with deer food plots, are the new awnless varieties. If you see the little yellow arrow down there at the bottom picture, that is the awn, or a little spike that is formed around the seed and will largely prevent deer from browsing on and consuming the seed head in the springtime. So what Craig has been really good demonstrating is that typically, I believe his estimate is about 1,000 pounds per acre of opportunity that you are missing by not planting awnless varieties. 1,000 pounds of food that can be provided to deer via the seed head after maturation. So consider that. In most places, these new awnless varieties are available. Last I checked, it was not a significant cost increase, so keep that in mind. The planting rate, that's what I've shown here for every forage. We're going to go through the planting rate, and there will be a seed drill planting rate as well as broadcasts. And all of these planting rates are pure live seed, and it is also assuming a monoculture. That is, if I was just doing 1 acre of wheat or rye or whatever, this would be the rate you would use. And of course that will differ when you're adding to a mix. Those different rates would change. So that is assuming a monoculture of the plant that we're talking about. Here is a very effective photograph taken by Craig Harper and published by the National Deer Association in Quality Whitetails, formerly the Quality Deer Management Association. But you can see the difference. There's a staggered pattern here of awned versus awnless wheat varieties here. And you can see the darker color there. You can see where the seed head has been browsed versus the lighter color where deer have not browsed it. So there is the proof in terms of showing in the same field when deer had a choice, this is what they selected to consume. And as you have probably seen in mixes over the years, wheat pairs very well with clovers and other forages. This is just one example of many. This is wheat and Bercine clover, and this photograph was taken on the 12th of March. But you can see here that both the clover and the wheat, they work well together and have provided a very effective food plot for deer. Next are oats. Oats are considered the most palatable, but keep in mind, we're talking about levels of really, really good. Rye, wheat, and oats are all palatable, but some people, and there are some studies that maybe show a little bit of a tendency for deer to select oats over the others. But again, these are levels of good. They're all good. The one potential knock against oats is that in some places, and of course this all depends on where you're at, how cold it gets, etc., they are not as cold hardy as wheat and certainly not as much as rye. So in my neck of the woods in Mississippi, we're not going to get weather that's going to kill oats, but we've definitely had some instances where growth of oats appears to completely stop during those cold snaps. So that's something to consider. The flip side is that if you are exclusively a bow hunter and you really want to focus on early season, this is a really, really good forage for you. The characteristics of a cereal grain, it's going to grow really, really quick. So it's going to get out of the ground quick for bow season, and it's going to be very attractive. So those are kind of your pros and cons. And consider there are some varieties that are more cold hardy. I would just suggest that you experiment. Get your regular Bob oats and maybe try some of these cold hardy varieties and just see if they perform better. Nothing like doing an experiment on your property and with your deer and see if the results are detectable and whether you want to invest more money in a cold hardy variety. Planting rate is the same for oats. Drill 90 pounds per acre, broadcast 120 pounds per acre. As with wheat, oats pairs very well with clovers. Here you see Bob oats and Berseem clover. On the 12th of March, you see both of those forages look really good, healthy, actively growing, and just another example of a mix and combination that can make a very effective deer food plot. And last we have rye, or cereal rye, it's sometimes called, but notice this is not rye grass, cereal rye or rye. It is the most cold tolerant of the cereal grains. So consider that the further north you are, the more extreme temperatures you have, or for the duration, if you have really cold temperatures for a long period of time, then you might want to move towards adding rye to your food plot. It is similar to oats in price, and what I mean by that, wheat is just about always going to be the cheapest, and oats and rye are typically going to be 50% more in price. Sometimes it could be double the price, I guess, depending on the variety, but they are generally a little bit more expensive, both oats and rye, as compared to wheat. The planting rate, again, is the same, drilling at 90 pounds per acre and 120 pounds per acre for broadcasts. One of the big differences I want to point your attention to here on the bottom photo that is very different from oats and from wheat is the height. Rye is generally going to get at least 4 foot tall. It can get 5 feet tall or even greater. So the structure can not be a problem, or it may be a problem depending on your objectives, and we'll go into that a little bit later. Here's an example of rye and Berseem clover, and you might notice just based on the previous photo showing oats and wheat, you can already see the height difference. So the rye here in March is really starting to take off, and again, eventually it's going to get over 4 foot tall. Here's some other photos, just again demonstrating this difference in growth and height. You'll see on the left where the arrow is pointing, that is the cereal rye, and on the right, almost indistinguishable at this point, unless you had closer inspection, are oats as well as wheat. So notice you can see a little bit different color with the rye, and again, they are on their way to gaining a much greater height than either wheat or oats. I mean a little bit more about the structure. Now, both of these figures here, photos, are not exclusively rye. The top one is Elban rye and Balansa clover. The bottom, Elban rye and Berseem clover. This is in a location with a very, very low deer density. That is the reason you see so much of the clover biomass. It had more of a normal deer density and the browsing rate were higher. The amount of clover and the height of the clover would be lower. But I put this to demonstrate a point. If you had a plot that was all rye or mostly rye, you can create a situation regarding the structure that would not be as conducive for turkeys to use it. So keep in mind that turkeys are really a lot more visually oriented. They want to be able to see around them to feel secure when they are foraging. So if you had a plot that had wheat versus something like rye, you're going to create a situation where a turkey is going to feel more comfortable in using and foraging in that plot. So I guess I would say if turkeys are a big concern, or maybe your priority is food plots for turkeys, then you might want to consider only using wheat or maybe oats and not use rye.